Hi, Charles. How are you?
I am very good. How are you?
I'm good. I have allowed share screen if you want to share in the meantime while startups join, but give them a few more minutes.
Sure. Um, can you see my screen?
Yes,
Okay.
perfect.
How are things going?
All good. And your side? Where are you today? Where are you based?
I'm based in Ireland.
On Ireland. Nice. Must be freezing.
Ah, um, yeah, today is very cold. I'll say that
Mm-hmm.
today is very, very cold.
Okay. I normally wait until about 5 minutes past, and then we can start.
Can you still see the slides?
Yes, I do. Full
Okay.
screen. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. To not waste any other time, we can get started. And then after, I will let the participants, they can add any questions to the chat, or we will while you're speaking. And then after your presentation, we'll answer those questions, or they can raise their hands during that time to ask them verbally. But go ahead. Thanks, Charles.
Great. Great. Hi, everyone. Yeah, welcome to the session of the do's and don'ts of early stage startups. I'm excited to share some insights that hopefully will help you navigate the challenging yet very rewarding journey of building a startup. Um, so first, a little bit about myself. My name is Charles Hope. I'm a founder of Your Startup Advisor. Over the years, I've had the privilege of founding multiple startups and advising numerous others, which is today what I love to do the most. My goal today is to share some practical advice based on my experiences to help you avoid common pitfalls and increase your chances of success. For more info about me, you can visit my website and feel free to email me when needed, whenever needed. Okay, so here's the agenda for today. I'll start with some key do's for early stage startups, followed by common don'ts and how to avoid them. We'll do the Q&A at the end, and the main objective of the whole presentation here is to equip you with actionable insights to help you in your startup journey. And finally, at the end, I'll provide some more information on how you can get in touch or connect with me. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump into it. And as I mentioned, let's start with the do's. So what to do in the early stages. Do validate your idea. Sounds obvious. It may sound very, very obvious to a lot of you, but you'll be surprised to how many people, how many founders don't validate the idea. So the first key to a successful startup is validating the idea. Why would you build anything before validating it? It makes absolutely no sense. And yet it happens way too often. Market research and customer discovery are crucial. Understand who your customers are, what the pain points are, and whether your solution effectively addresses those pain points. This simple step reduces the risk of building something that nobody wants, which again, it happens way too often. We get wrapped up in this idea that the vision we have is the perfect solution and that we're solving a real problem, and lo and behold, we'll build it and nobody buys, nobody uses it. So please validate the idea. In the process of validating the idea, do run effective user interviews. Please do not use common sense to run interviews. Just don't. There's no such thing as common sense, and user interviews are far from being common sense. Study how to run effective user interviews. Effective user interviews are structured and focused on gathering actionable insights, not just opinions. Learning how to ask the right questions and listen effectively is key to understand your users' needs. So here's a recommendation. Go to your online bookstore or to your closest bookstore and look for a book titled The Mom Test. Literally, the mom test. Mom as in mother, right? So the mom test. Look for that book, buy the book, read it. It's very short, but it explains in a very simple way how to run proper user interviews. Okay? Now, so you validated your idea, you've spoken to your users, you interview your users, and as you probably guessed, building a startup is hard, right? It's very hard. So please do build a strong team. Take your time to search for, find, and evaluate potential co-founders. It will take time, right? It will take time. It takes months, most probably. Most of the time, it takes months to find the right people to join your startup. So it will take time, and do not settle for anything less than love. And I mean it, love. Finding the right co-founders and team members who complement your skills and love the vision for the startup will significantly impact your startup's success. Look for people who love your idea, are passionate, reliable, and bring diverse perspectives to the table. There are three main things you should be looking for in a potential co-founder. One, do they complement your skills? Two, can you actually work with that person? Right? So do they complement your skills? Can you work with that person? Can you see yourself working with that individual for the next 5 to 10 years? And three, do they love the problem you're solving? If they don't love the problem you're solving, gone. If you cannot see yourself working with that person for 5 years, gone. If they don't complement your skills, gone. Don't settle. Do not settle. And when you find those individuals, please do disagree with your co-founders. The importance of surrounding yourself with people who have a different mindset or way of thinking cannot be overstated. Healthy disagreements lead to better decision making and innovation. To build a stronger team, you must encourage open dialogue and respect different opinions. Please encourage open dialogue and respect different opinions. Do create an MVP. MVP stands for minimum viable product, where viable is the critical part here. Viable. When creating your minimum viable product, focus on the essential features and iterative feedback. Build the simplest, easiest, and cheapest solution to validate your assumptions. I'll repeat that. Build the simplest, easiest, and cheapest solution to validate your assumptions. An MVP will allow you to test these assumptions quickly, get user feedback, and make the necessary adjustments before investing too much time and money on a more complex solution, a more complex platform, a more complex product. So, simplest, easiest, and cheapest solution to validate your assumptions. And here's a visual that I love that helps visualize how to build an MVP. What is the approach to building an MVP, right? So I wanted to picture you live in a world where there are no cars, no bicycles, no motorcycles. Let's go back to horses, right? It was either walking or horses. So the problem you're trying to solve as a startup founder back in those days is, how can I make going from point A to point B easier, right? How can I make that much, much easier than it is today, which is either walking or jumping on a horse? Okay, so what will be the MVP? And imagine you, the startup founder, right? You have in your head, like you have this vision of the ideal solution is the car. You can already envision the car in your mind, right? Okay, so you envision the car. Well, what is the MVP? Well, the MVP again is the simplest and cheapest and easiest solution to get from point A to point B. What is that? A simple skateboard, a piece of wood, some wheels attached to it. You jump on the skateboard and you slide from point A to point B, right? That's your MVP. That's your MVP. And you take this MVP, the piece of board with the wheels, and you give it to to potential users, and users start using it, right? And you have some users that love it, you have some users that hate it, right? But from the users that are using it, they start giving you feedback. It's like, okay, look, I love this, but there are a few things that I would love to have more control over the direction where I'm going. And maybe I would love to sit, in this contraption in this device. Okay, so you start iterating, and your next version is, lo and behold, the bicycle. All of a sudden, you have a structure in which you can sit, you have better control of the direction you're going, and you have this new iteration of your solution, and you give it to users, and users start using it, right? And they will begin to give you feedback, and you start getting that feedback, and all of a sudden you start getting the feedback from users saying, hey, I love this, but the pedaling part of it is really tiring, especially going up the hills, and it's really tiring. It would be great if there was a way in which I could use this without having to pedal. And lo and behold, you have the motorcycle, right? And that's your next iteration. You have the motorcycle. You can still sit, you still have better control, but now you don't need to pedal, right? You can just turn on the engine and you go from point A to point B. And okay, great, the motorcycle is out and people are using it, right? And now the next iteration, as you start getting feedback from your users, is like, okay, I love this, but it's very risky. Like, if I get into an accident in a motorcycle, that you know, it's my health, it's my body that it's in danger immediately, right? Because of the risk to it. And your next iteration, okay, oh, it's okay. I'll build a capsule around it so you can be more protected. And your next iteration is the car, and you arrive to the car. But you started with the vision of the car, and you do not build the simplest, easiest solution is not a simplest version of the car. No. The simplest and easiest solution is, how do I solve the problem of going from point A to point B without walking, without jumping on a horse? What is the simplest and easiest solution? A piece of board with wheels. That's where you started. That's where you started with your MVP. Okay. Do release early and often, right? MVPs should be launched quickly. You should not take long, except for biotech and deep tech. But for most startups, MVPs should not take long. A month, maybe a couple of months. You want your product in your users' hands as soon as possible, because only by using it will your users be able to provide you feedback. Feedback is critical, guys, right? Then you gather feedback and you release again, and you listen. Then you release again and you listen for more, over and over and over and over, right? Release quickly, release often. Do use good customer channels. Using appropriate customer channels is crucial. Just because everyone is using TikTok does not mean it's the right channel for your customers. So in the customer discovery section, when you're validating your idea, that's when you better understand who your customers are. And by understanding who your customers are, you know where they hang out. Do they hang out on TikTok, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook? Use good, proper channels to reach your customers. Understand where your audience spends their time and focus your efforts on those channels to maximize your reach and engagement. Please do carve time for yourself. Your life is not your startup. There's no you without your mind and body. There's no startup without you. Take time to take care of yourself. Pause every now and then. Take time. Balancing work and personal life is essential to maintaining your well-being and ensuring long-term success. By taking care of yourself, you avoid burnouts. Do keep your startup lean. Keep your startup lean, right? Always. And not only in the early stages. Spend only what's strictly necessary. Don't spend money just because you have money, right? Being frugal helps you stretch your runway and focus on what's truly important for your startup's growth. So spend only on what's strictly necessary to keep moving forward and to keep growing. Don't spend money just because you have the money. Now, let's move to the don'ts, which are just as important, if not even more important than the do's. Okay, don't go all in when you can't. One common mistake is going all in into your startup when you don't need to or can't. There is this belief that if you launch a startup, you must quit your day job and go all in. Well, that's BS. Most people cannot afford to go all in at the start, and that's okay. It's okay to begin your startup as a side hustle. It's okay to begin your startup as a side hustle. Don't overlook market research. Overlooking market research is a very common mistake. If you don't understand the market, if you don't understand your users, and therefore you don't understand your problem you're solving, always invest time in researching your market, understanding trends, and knowing your competitors. You need to know this like the back of your hand. Do not neglect financial planning. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. Neglecting financial planning is a very common pitfall. Your startup, it's very simple. Your startup will not survive without money. So plan accordingly and always monitor your financials. Proper financial planning helps you make informed decisions and stay afloat. Yeah. Remember, your startup will not survive without money. And that links to uh, one of the do's: keep your startup lean. Don't reinvent the wheel, and please don't reinvent the wheel. Just stop reinventing the wheel on the basics. If there is an off-the-shelf tool that you can use it. Why develop it? Why waste time into creating something that's already there, right? Don't develop Don't develop it. Use the tools that are off the shelf. Use business models that your customers are already familiar with. Too many times I've seen startups creating these innovative, they call it innovative business models that serve no one. Innovating on the business model is not where you want to innovate. Innovate on the solution, on the problem you're trying to solve. This will save you time and money and allows you to focus on your core business. So stop reinventing the wheel, use off-the-shelf solutions and tools, and focus on your core business. Don't fundraise too soon. Again, don't enter fundraising just because it's what startups do. Like, only enter fundraising when it makes sense to your startup. And if you're a first-time founder and you're just building your MVP, then going into fundraising before your MVP is out with users does not make sense. It doesn't make sense. So if you're a first-time founder and you're building your startup and you're building MVP, the time to go fundraising is after the MVP is out. It's when your users are already using your MVP and you're gathering feedback and you're getting more users. That's the time to go fundraising. You don't go fundraising because you need money to build the MVP. The software today is way too cheap to build, to need money for to building an MVPs, especially for software. Ensure you have a solid plan for fundraising and understand how the funds will be used to growth, to drive growth. Okay. Now, don't neglect preparing for fundraising. The time will come if it's in your plans to fundraise. Do not neglect preparing for fundraising, right? Develop and practice your pitches. Fully understand funding tools like safes, convertible notes, and equity. Build and fully customize your list of investors. Proper preparation ensures you can confidently present your vision and secure your needed funding. So don't neglect preparing for fundraising. Don't scale too quickly. Again, I've seen this way too many times. Startup that start getting users and think they've reached some level of product market fit, and it's like, oh, let's just put money into this and grow and grow and grow. It's a common mistake. Don't even think about scaling until you have validated that your solution is actually solving the problem your startup is trying to solve. Just because you have users does not mean you have product market fit. Scaling too quickly can lead to overextension and operational inefficiencies. Validate your product market fit first. Validate your product market fit first. Do not ignore customer feedback. Always listen to your customers' feedback and openly communicate with them. You should be always talking to your customers. Always talk to your customers. Customer feedback provides valuable insights into what works and what doesn't. However, don't listen blindly. Analyze the feedback and decide what makes sense to implement. Keep an eye out for patterns. Is there a feedback that keeps coming back from multiple users? Listen to those. Don't try to be everything. Do not try to be everything to everyone. Trying to be everything to everyone can dilute your efforts and confuse your value proposition. Because if you start getting feedback from multiple users and each user has a different feedback, and you say, okay, I will tackle that feedback and I will implement that feature, and I will tackle that other feedback and I will implement that feature, and I will tackle that other feedback and I will implement that feature. All of a sudden, you have a Frankenstein in your hands with a lot of features that only one user is using. Focus on your end goal and stay on track. This focus helps you build a strong, recognizable brand and product. So don't be everything to everyone. Don't read too much TechCrunch. TechCrunch is not a problem, right? I'm not saying TechCrunch is a problem. No. My point here is reading too much TechCrunch can lead to unrealistic expectations. Because on TechCrunch and similars, you always read stories of successful fundraisers. This startup raised a seed round. This startup raised a Series A. This raised a Series B. And all of a sudden, you have this expectation that fundraising is easy. Anyone can raise money. It's not. TechCrunch is not talking about all the failures. There's no TechCrunch to talk about all the startups that have failed, all the startups that were unable to raise their round, which is the most common case. Okay, so focus on what you are doing and not the rare success stories published in the media. Those are rare. Success stories are rare. Every startup journey is unique, and comparing yourself to others can be counterproductive. And also, this is very important. Do not merge you to your startup. You and your startup are two independent entities. You are not your startup. Most startups fail, and that's okay. Your value as a person is not tied to the success of your startup. Maintain a healthy work-life balance and take care of your well-being. And if your startup fails, the startup failed, not you. If anything, you are on the other side with more experience. You've learned tons from building these startups. You made new connections. You're much better off. and you're better prepared for the next one. Thank you very much. That's it. And if you need any further resources or support, here's my information. Feel free to contact me, to book a chat. It's free. I'm here for you to help in any way that I can. And also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And much success, everyone, in your own journeys.
Thank you so much, Charles. I'll kick us off with some questions while I let everyone online. If you have any questions, you're welcome to pop them in to the chat or raise your hand. But I want to start with more specifically, if a startup has already made some of these don't mistakes, how can they recover or pivot?
Well, then go back to the basics, right? If you already make all these, mistakes in the don'ts, what I would say is take your time to go back to the basics. Take your time to just start over, start fresh. Maybe if you validated, if you already did the validation of your problem and there's a real problem you're solving, and you validated with users, but you've already made all these mistakes, then it's okay to just scrap everything you've done, or maybe not everything, but start fresh. Start from scratch. Yes, it will take another few months to start fresh, but you'll be better off. You've already made those mistakes of the don'ts. You'll be better off.
Yeah, 100%. And then are there specific industries where some of these principles might differ or need adaptation? Or is it the
Absolutely.
same unanimously? Yeah.
Yeah, no, there are like this presentation mostly is for software startups, right? So if you're a software startup, B2B, B2C, mobile app, SaaS, etc., um, all of these apply. But if you're building a new electric car, that is different. If you're on biotech, that is different. Um, because on those industries, you need a lot of upfront resources. It's it's very hard to build an MVP in those industries, build an MVP without the funding. So there are definitely industries. So two examples are transportation, biotech, deep tech, Internet of Things. Yeah.
Yeah, understood. Thank you. And going back to the validating ideas, what do you think what are some of the specific methods or tools you recommend for validating a startup idea effectively?
So the best one is actually talking to potential users. So actually, as the lean startup methodology indicates, is just get out of the building and talk to people. And in that sense is read the book that I recommended, which is the Mom Test. Read that book, prepare a set of questions. Apologies. Prepare a set of questions following the framework from the book, from the Mom Test, and just get out of the building and start talking to people. But talk to people. No, don't talk to anyone. Talk to those that you believe have that problem, right? Don't talk to everyone, because not everyone will be your user, not everyone will be your customer. Um, have an overview or a broad understanding, okay, what type of people you want to talk to, and get out of the building and talk to them. And there are many ways you can do that, right? So you can find meetups close by, or events, or conferences, or even on social media, right? Facebook groups, etc. There are many ways that you can try and reach out to people in those groups or those potential users. And you can get creative in many ways, but the best way is talking to them. Talk to your potential users to validate your idea, following the mom test framework. And here's the thing with the mom test framework that is very important. The mom test framework, when you're talking to potential users, you never mention your startup idea. At no point in the conversation, your startup idea is mentioned. At no point. It's all about listening to your potential users and the problems they have around the problem you're trying to solve. But you never talk about your startup idea. You never say, "Oh, look, I'm building this. Would you use it?" No, that's a very common mistake. But again, it's better to read the mom test. And then once you've talked to a lot of users and you have an initial validation that the problem is there, again, the second best thing you can do is build your MVP quickly and put your MVP in the hands of the users and see if they use it. And not only see if they will use it, see if they will pay for it. That's the ultimate validation. It's people paying to use, what you build.
Agreed. Yeah, in our accelerator programs, we call this the customer discovery, and we heavily rely on the feedback received from this customer discovery, and it's basically going out and validating your idea, and we always encourage startups to fall in love with the problem, not the solution.
Absolutely.
Uh, yeah.
100%.
So maybe diving into the team, you spoke about team,
Yeah.
and how can a solo entrepreneur, which we may have quite a few on the call and in the program, how can a solo entrepreneur find and attract the right co-founder or co-founders?
Yeah. So in what there are different ways, online and offline, right? So if you're offline, again, meetups, hackathons, and other types of similar events where uh, entrepreneurs or early stage founders meet, like founder weekend or startup weekend events similar to that. Um, those are places where you can meet others and have conversations around, building teams. And then online, the best platform to find a co-founder would be the Y Combinator co-founder matching tool. Currently, that would be the best one to meet people. Um, and when you're sorry, and then when you meet those individuals, when you start talking with them, um, if you're looking for co-founders for your startup, you have to be the best, because most of you won't have the resources to pay a salary, right? So in the early days, the only offer you will have for the potential co-founder is equity, right? And by the way, in the early days, go 50-50. Do not get greedy here, right? Oh no, I came up with idea. Don't. Ideas are worthless. On their own are worthless, right? Are what matters is execution. So the only thing you will have to offer is equity in the early days, not a salary, right? So how do you convince someone to work with you for a long period of time with no salary and only equity? And the way to do that is to sell the dream. Sell the dream, not the responsibilities they will have, or oh, I'm looking for someone to help me with this or help me with that, and those are kind of the responsibilities they will have, or this or that. No, sell the dream for your startup. What's the dream for your startup? How will your startup change the world? How will the world look differently in 5 to 10 years because your startup became successful? Sell the dream, right? It's the dream that will convince them, to join you in that battle to build a company. And as I was saying before, in the early days, equal equity. Don't get greedy. Just go 50-50 with a vesting schedule, so that you have equal levels of motivation in the long run.
Thank you. Yeah, great. Maybe talking about the customer channels that you mentioned, how can startups identify the best customer channels for their specific target audience?
By that that comes up in the customer discovery phase, right? Where
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
out of the building talking to your users. Um, by talking to your users and better understanding your users, you will know where they hang out, right? You will know either if it's Twitter, if it's LinkedIn, if it's Facebook, if it's TikTok. Um, and it also depends on the type of product you're selling, right? Um, but most importantly, it comes down to the users. It comes down to the users you're talking to. And in those conversations, that's where you will learn more about where they hang out, what kind of platforms, what kind of channels they regularly use for themselves. But that's the best way, by talking to users.
yeah. And if some of these startups find themselves rapidly growing, can you elaborate on how to maintain lean operations during this phase of rapid growth?
Um, yeah. So just be prepared for chaos. It gets chaotic, right? In the early days, if you there's this thing when you've reached a certain level of product market fit, it's when you don't need to worry about user acquisition anymore, because you're getting so many new users, you cannot manage them properly, right? All these new users that are coming. So um, it gets chaotic, right? It gets chaotic. Just focus, go again, let it be, let the chaos be, and focus on the basics, focus on the essentials, right? Focus on your systems being up and running so that your users can continue to use your product or can continue to use your service, right? And focus on continue talking to your users as much as you can. Focus on great customer experience. If you have a ticketing system, or you get customers opening tickets, or trying to get in touch, have open lines, right? Don't let those communications fall into long waits in which a customer is trying to talk to you and they have to wait 3 days to talk to you, right? So focus on those basics. Uh, Keep them happy. Keep the conversation going. Um, of course, always talk to your users, and focus on the basics, right? Focus on your product to continue to run with, even with all the
Yeah,
chaos.
yeah. Thanks, Charles. A big challenge for a lot of the startups is fundraising. So how can startups decide when the time is right to pursue fundraising?
When is the right time?
Yeah,
Um, so um, so as I was saying during the presentation, if you're a first-time founder, um, if this is your first run at building a startup and you're building a software startup, be that a mobile app or a SaaS or B2C or B2B, this is your first time. Uh, the right time is not before the MVP. So in the early days, you have to focus on validating your idea, build the MVP, put the MVP in the hands of your users, and you need to start to see a pattern of growth of users in your app. So week over week, you can see a chart of growth up and to the right. When you start seeing that pattern of growth, and you need to see a pattern of growth, then think about fundraising, but not before that. Not before that. Now, as we were discussing before, if you're on hard tech or biotech or Internet of Things, that's a different matter. Depending on what you're building, you may need a lot of resources even to build an MVP. So then fundraising, it comes before the MVP. But then you need to be prepared to build your case and to then defend your case of why this is a problem worth solving, why it's a massive opportunity, and to have validation that this is a problem that actually exists, right? Now, if you're a, if you're not a first-time founder, if you've have experience building startups in the past, but most importantly, if you have successes in the past, right? Maybe you have an exit or you have an acquisition event. So you have some sort of liquidity event in a previous startup, then you might get away with raising before the MVP, because all of a sudden now you have a pedigree, you have a history of success, right? So again, those are rare cases, but they happen. So if you have a pedigree, if you have a history of success, you could raise before the MVP.
Got it. That's all the questions I have. If there are no other questions so far, as you see, there is a comment in the chat just asking to share the slides with us. So, Charles, I do have your slides, so if you're okay with me sharing that with
Yeah,
everyone.
of course.
Also, this is being recorded, so I will upload it for them, for the ones that weren't able to join today. So that would be helpful as well. Are there any other questions from anyone? Okay, cool. Well, that's the end of this session. Thank you so much, Charles.
My pleasure.
Yeah, looking forward to the next session for everyone, which I will let Arif know soon. But thank you for joining everybody, and thank you, Charles, for taking the time to give your presentation. Hope you all have a great day further.
Thank you very much, guys, and much success to everyone. Much success.
Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you. Chat soon. Bye.